Speaking of villains and fraud.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
So Trump has pardoned a new fraudster. Seems to have a soft spot for them. Perhaps he sees kindred spirits here. And Caroline Leavitt yesterday got asked about this particular commutation. So this was this guy who basically ran a Ponzi scheme, defrauded, was found guilty of defrauding. There were over 1,000 people who testified to those submitted statements to the court, talking about the way that he had stolen their life savings. And we're not talking about billionaires here. There's like teachers and nurses and firefighters and stuff who had their life ruined by this dude. Trump decided that he deserved a commutation of his sentence. Caroline Leavitt got asked about that. Let's take a listen.
Why did the president commute the sentence of David Gentile recently? He was a private equity executive. He served 12 days out of a 7-year sentence. Prosecutors said he defrauded $1.6 billion with thousands of victims, including veterans, farmers, teachers. Why was he pardoned?
He issued a commutation for Mr. Gentile, who's the former CEO and co-founder of GBP Capital Holdings. Unlike similar companies, GBP paid regular annualized distributions to its investors. In 2015, GBP disclosed to investors the possibility of using investor capital to pay some of these distributions rather than funding them from current operations. Even though this was disclosed to investors, the Biden Department of Justice claimed it was a Ponzi scheme. This claim was profoundly undercut by the fact that GBP had explicitly told investors what would happen. At trial, the government was unable to tie any supposedly fraudulent representations to Mr. Gentile. In short, again, this is another example that has been brought to the president's attention of a weaponization of justice from the previous administration, and therefore he signed this commutation.
Let's put E3 up on the screen so I can get into some of the details of what this guy was convicted of. So the headline here is Trump frees fraudster just days into his 7-year prison sentence. By the way, this guy was convicted alongside his partner. The partner is still in prison serving the sentence. He had a lesser sentence than this guy, but he did not get the commutation. I'd be pretty pissed if I was that guy. Anyway, they say in court filings, prosecutors said that Mr. Gentile and Mr. Schneider over several years used private equity funds controlled by Mr. Gentile's company, GPB Capital, to defraud 10,000 investors by misrepresenting the performance of the funds and the source of money used to make monthly distribution payments. More than 1,000 people submitted statements attesting to their losses, according to prosecutors, who characterized the victims as hardworking everyday people, including small business owners, farmers, veterans, teachers, nurses. I lost my whole life savings, one wrote, adding, I am living from check to check. In a statement after the sentencing in May, Joseph Nasella Jr., the U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of New York, said Mr. Gentile and Mr. Schneider had raised approximately $1.6 billion from individual investors based on false promises of generating investment returns from the profits of portfolio companies, all while using investor capital to pay distributions and create a false appearance of success. The sentences, Mr. Nasella added, were a warning to would-be fraudsters that seeking to get rich by taking advantage of investors gets you a one-way ticket to jail. So, I mean, the structure of this classic Ponzi scheme, take in a bunch of money, make a bunch of big promises, and then instead of actually generating returns that you can use to pay off your investors, instead they just would use new investors' money to pay off the old investors. That's what's called a Ponzi scheme. And that is what this guy was found guilty of. So, we haven't discerned in this particular case whether there was some direct, whether this guy was friends with Don Jr., paid some whoever who was hunting buddies with him, or, friends with Peter. We haven't discerned what that particular connection was, but we have seen a pattern in this administration of fraudsters, and specifically fraudsters with direct connections to Donald Trump, getting let off the hook for their white-collar crimes, and it is quite disgusting.
Yeah, if you read after they say he raised $1.6 billion from individual investors based on false pretenses and investment. I mean, it's literally as classic as a Ponzi scheme as it gets, but the White House is saying it's actually not. Why are they getting involved in whether something is a Ponzi scheme or not? Is it maybe because somebody influential helped to convince them? As you said, I would love to see the behind the scenes on that. You don't just get a commutation from the president of the United States, especially from this one, without somebody somewhere saying something. And by the way, this is part of the issue. This is all part of a pattern now of a lot of these pay to play. Let's go to the next one, please. This is about this Ponzi schemer who got Trump clemency, then got a new 37-year term did you guys hear me correctly? Is that a convicted Ponzi schemer whose 24-year prison term was commuted by Trump in 2021 was sentenced to another 37 years behind bars for stealing $44 million from investors after he was released. Eliyahu Weinstein was sentenced Friday for defrauding investors who believed their money was buying COVID-19 mask baby formula and first aid kits bound for Ukraine. Instead, use the money to repay early investors and for personal expenses like gambling in casinos and buying real estate. That
Incredible.
is despicable.
Yeah, incredible. And the other thing, when we were preparing for this segment, the thing that was crazy to me is like, I didn't even like this guy who got reconvicted and is just like doing schemes instantly after Trump, originally commutes his sentence. I didn't see news articles about that. At another time, that would be a huge scandal. And then put this next one up on the screen. This is E5. This was another one. I mean, it barely broke through that this even happened. This tax cheat who got pardoned after his mom, who's a big fundraiser for Trump in general and attended this $1 million dinner, after she goes to this dinner, lo and behold, her son gets a pardon. Oh, gee, wonder how that happened. The allegation, not even the allegation, I mean, he was convicted of this. This guy was running, and there was actually his mother and him were running this nursing home conglomerate. And you know how you're supposed to, as a business owner, withhold taxes from your employees that you send to the federal government, and then, then they pay off whether they have to pay more or less at the end of the year, but there's, tax withholding. He was withholding the money and just keeping it and spending it on yachts and vacations and luxury goods and whatever, which I'm like, not only obviously is that wildly unethical and illegal and wrong, but how did you not know you were going to get caught? Like, that is, it seems to me like something so easy for the IRS to figure out what's going on here. And so he commits this blatant fraud, just out and out steals cash from his employees, spends it on yachts and vacations, etc., and then gets a pardon from the president because his mom does some fundraising for him.
$1 million
That's
per
disgusting.
person. It is disgusting.
I mean, we really genuinely, like, the pardon power is out of control. And do I have any hope that this is going to be changed because it requires a constitutional amendment? No, I do not. But I saw Ro Khanna calling for, hey, we got to do something about this because this is crazy. And Trump, of course, takes it to the most grotesque level, but it's not like he's the first to abuse the pardon power. Of course, we saw what Biden did with it. Before Bill Clinton, what he pardoned his brother or whatever. I mean, it's always like sketchy shit that happens with the pardon power, especially at the end of administrations.
He didn't just pardon his brother, by the way. Remember Michael Milken or any of these other people?
Oh, that's right.
Oh,
yeah. No, absolutely.
Like, there's a lot, like this, the origins of like sketchy rich people buying pardons goes all the way back.
Yeah,
like,
and what it used to be is they would do it like Biden did at the end of his term, when it's like, people aren't going to like this, but whatever, I'm out of here anyway. Now Trump has just normalized, no, I'm just going to pardon the fraudsters, the January 6th rioters, and like all these white-collar fraudsters and Republican members of Congress like George Santos. I'm just going to do it all the time. And eventually, there's going to be so many, you're not even going to keep track and you're not going to really care anymore. And this is just how it is. Do something about it. I have this power, is like the power of the king, and I'm going to use it as such. And it has a major implication. We're about to talk about, Pete Hegseth and whatever, because anyone who is in Trump's good graces knows that they can commit illegal acts and be like with impunity, because as long as they stay in his good graces, then they are likely to get the benefit of the pardon. So they don't really have to worry about whether or not they're following the law. It creates a whole class of people around the king who can act with impunity because they benefit from the king's favor and are able to do whatever they want with no consequence.
I mean, I've said one of the things that people don't appreciate is how monarchical the president can be. And one of the, I was kind of telling you this yesterday, the origins of pardon power go back to the time of the Constitution, when the idea of a Republican, small r, leader was kind of anathema all across Europe. And so there were a lot of debates for all of these people who were former English subjects of like, how can we possibly confer authority onto our leader who is democratically elected, but who will retain the respect of the monarchs of Europe, who, they don't disappear until I don't know, 1914, 1918, right? So 200 years or 150 years or whatever after the Constitution is actually being written. So they put in a lot of these pardon powers. And it was a debate there at the time.
Yeah.
What eventually basically comes through is they're like, no, like because he's democratically elected, can as a check against the judicial branch. But the most convincing argument at the time was that the pardon power was necessary to quell and to quash like vindictive feelings after insurrection or rebellion. So if you think back to Andrew Johnson or how Lincoln potentially would have used the pardon if he had lived, like that was one of the arguments that really pushed through the Constitutional Convention. They did, though, envision, they're like, what if the president uses it to cover up treason and co-conspirators? This was raised by some of the founding fathers. Eventually didn't really win out. But yeah, I mean, I do think that this is part of the problem. The pardon power is crazy. It's actually insane.
Yeah.
And it's one of those where...
At least you could imagine a process where like it has to be approved by Congress or something. But this just like, no, I'm going to just give blanket immunity to anyone who's nice to me, creates a really fucked up system.
Totally. And then you have multiple presidents who pardoned family members. Roger Clinton, that was a famous one back in the 90s. I mean, Biden's pardon for hunters. Look, I know it sounds quaint or whatever, but it's actually crazy. So like any and all crimes, you are absolved. How can you possibly have that? Like, it's nuts.
Yeah.
And then multiple billionaires and others who are, look, they always are able to be like, oh, it was unfair to me. The Milken one remains the craziest. One of my favorite books was specifically about Michael Milken, and it's by James Stewart, specifically about the whole like insider trading arbitrage scandal back in the 1980s. And Rudy Giuliani was one of the people who helped prosecute them. And then he later becomes a lobbyist, and he's like, actually, you should pardon Michael Milken. That's what they got away with. And this is the first Trump administration. It was totally nuts.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.